You said you initially said you didn't use email for public business, and it turns out you did use private email for that. You initially said Gerald Bailey left voluntarily. It turned out your office forced him. Why should people trust you?
Well, look, I've done the right things. Gerald Bailey, he's left. He did the right thing. It's good for our state. I continue to look for new leadership all the time. I'm going to continue to look for new leadership. I did that in business, and I'm going to continue to do it.
He is the 45th governor of the state of Florida. He came to the job with plenty of questions about his past, and he has rankled more than a few people with his policies and his somewhat odd demeanor. But Florida's Rick Scott may be stuck this time in a bind with members of his own party with a lawsuit alleging some dirty tricks that could turn that state upside down. Our guest has been following the story in national politics from his seat as the senior political reporter for Sunshine State News. Kevin Derby is back in the MidPoint house. Kevin, good to have you back again.
Great to be here, Ed. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and start here, because I think the question that was asked of Rick Scott there is a very good one. Why should we trust you? What's this all about now? He says he fired somebody. Somebody else says he left. What is it? Well,
Gerald Bailey, the commissioner of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, was fired. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Rick Scott was making changes as he started his second term. They pushed Bailey out the door, and they initially said he was left on his own accord. Now you have Republicans, members of the cabinet, saying, well, we knew Bailey was going, but we did not know he was being fired. Bailey's a very well-respected political official, very well-respected law enforcement official. They are hopping mad at Rick Scott. Republicans in his own party, Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, Jeff Atwater, the state CFO, Florida Agriculture Commissioner Adam Putnam, all of them are up in arms with Rick Scott right now.
How much of this has been coming to Rick Scott? Because it seems as if you go right back to the very first moment when he was running his first gubernatorial campaign, there were a lot of questions about some dark dealings here and there. And Rick has this smile about him where he never really seems to answer questions. It would seem as if we've been getting to this point sooner or later.
Yeah, Rick Scott is not a natural politician by any stretch of the imagination. He ran against politics as usual in 2010 when he beat Bill McCollum. He has prided himself on taking on the Republican establishment in Tallahassee, and it's now coming back and haunting him. Look, Rick Scott couldn't even get his own candidate reelected as chairperson of the Republican Party of Florida. There's blood in the water. Republicans smell it just as much as Democrats. Also, Rick Scott, he came in 2010 as the darling of the Tea Party, talking about lower government, talking about smaller government, lower taxes. And unfortunately, he's gone in a different direction. State revenue has gone up, but so has state spending. His first budget announcement was done at a Tea Party event in Central Florida. His latest budget announcement in front of the media at the state capitol.
We don't want to just make this a regional issue, because if you think about it, this is one of the most populous states in the nation right now. A tremendous amount of power here. People are moving to Florida on an everyday basis here. A lot of money running through Florida. The question still fits, though. Is Rick Scott somebody that they can trust? It would seem that all of this is leading up to this being not a guy that should be trusted.
Yeah, absolutely. His numbers, he's upside down. His numbers with Republicans are not as strong as it used to be.
And that's the key. His own party is
starting to turn against him a little bit. Look, they liked him. They kept him for a second term because he was against Charlie Crist, a person who in 4 years went from being a conservative Republican to running for the U.S. Senate as an independent to being a very liberal Democrat, all within the span of a few years. That has made Rick Scott look a lot better in retrospect. Now that he's in his second term, he is starting to quack like a lame duck. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
How much trouble is he in?
Well, I don't think he's going to be in trouble in terms of being removed from office, but I do think his political clout has dropped tremendously in recent weeks. We see that it's not where he needs to be at the start of his second term. I think he has enough to get most of his agenda through the legislature, including a tax cut on cell phones, wireless services, cable TV. I think that will be fine, but he's not in a strong position that he should be at the start of his second term with solid Republican majorities in both chambers.
Fair to say that because Florida is such a big state, such a populous state, that could this hurt the people of Florida down the road when, as a governor, he has got to deal in national issues and deal with the federal government getting involved in the state?
Yeah, absolutely, especially with the Medicaid expansion. Where Rick Scott goes on that still remains to be seen. It's going to come back one way or the other. So yeah, absolutely. Federal issues still remain a problem with him. He's just not being seen as a strong leader as he starts his second term.
Are we looking at really, and you don't want to say this out loud, but sure, let's go ahead and say it out loud, that his last election was simply just the lesser of two evils?
Absolutely. Rick Scott has been winning the lesser of two evil election since day one, against Bill McCollum in the Republican primary in 2010, against Alex Sink, the Democrat, and now against Charlie Crist. That tells you a lot more about his opponents than about him, about his abilities.
Do you think the lawsuit has any chance of moving forward and actually succeeding?
And I don't think so. I think one of the problems is Bailey is not talking to the state attorney's office. Bailey is talking to the media. He is not talking to the state attorney. That raises questions. I don't think there's going to be a smoking gun. It will keep Rick Scott on the defensive politically, but it's not going to be enough to remove him from office or anything like that.
Yeah, talk sometimes to the real people, not necessarily to the media. Okay, we're going to turn to the national scene after a short break to wax about Scott Walker's numbers, Rand Paul's missteps, and where the big money may be going. Because we're still always talking about who is going to be president in 2016, even now. Stand by, MidPoint continues. Break out the notebooks. Welcome back the senior political reporter for Sunshine State News and one who follows doings in and out of the Beltway as well. Kevin Derby joins us here in the studio. Let's get national now and go to Scott Walker. He's going after Mitt Romney's donors right now. He wants the big money guys, but the big money doesn't seem to be that willing to go after him right now.
No, there are other candidates in the mix right now. Jeb Bush, of course, Chris Christie, other people looking at kind of the same Romney donors that Walker's looking at. Having said that, though, Scott Walker is in one. He has one advantage over the other candidates. He is a bridge between the GOP establishment, the types who back Romney and Bush, at the same time helping conservatives, appealing to the conservatives, Tea Party movements with his record in Wisconsin against the unions. The fact he's from neighboring Iowa, Wisconsin neighbors Iowa, that helps him. Scott Walker's actually in a very good position right now.
But is he really the best of the bunch at this point? Because it is such a wide open field. You didn't even mention Rubio. I mean, some people think that with Mitt Romney going out, Rubio was the one who immediately gains the favorite status. We haven't seen any of that yet.
No, we haven't. Rubio damaged himself severely with his role in the Gang of Eight in the Senate pushing immigration reform. And Rubio is fighting for the same donors, the same political base that Jeb Bush is. Look, Scott Walker's in a very strong position. You look at American history, with a handful of exceptions, Harding, JFK, Obama, our presidents don't come from the Senate. They come from being governors, Reagan, Clinton, Carter. They come from outside the Beltway. And that is one advantage that Scott Walker has over the likes of Ted Cruz or Rand Paul or Marco Rubio. He's a much fresher face, isn't contaminated by the Potomac. He is a much, much stronger candidate for the heartland.
Rand Paul was given a tremendous amount of push early on. People said the libertarian candidate, a fresh face that's out there. He's stumbling quite a lot here in the last couple of weeks. He's finding out that it's not that easy, even if you're Rand Paul and claiming that you're the fresh face.
Yeah, absolutely. Rand Paul has made some strange maneuvers. He's being caught in the Senate, some of it being before standing on both sides of the issues, kind of way John Kerry did back in the day. There is that Rand Paul has also made some very strange hires, especially in Iowa, where his staff is really starting to irritate the local GOP more than it should.
So he is already making big mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And also one thing, look, his father, whatever we think of him, his father had a dedicated core base. Some of that's coming to Rand Paul, and that's not necessarily a good thing. A lot of the Ron Paul activists just aren't ready for prime time. A lot of them turn off a lot of conservative and Republican voters.
When you talk about turning off conservatives, I immediately think of Ted Cruz, because right now he says he wants to do absolutely anything in his power to stop Loretta Lynch from becoming the new Attorney General. Even John Boehner has slapped back at him. A number of the members of the Republican Party have, I think what they'd like to do is tell him, Ted, please shut up and go away. But he's not. How much damage is he doing himself by being the renegade? Well,
I think Ted Cruz is winning applause from conservative activists. I don't think he's helping himself with donors. He's not helping himself with the GOP establishment. I think Ted Cruz will find it very difficult to make a presidential bid.
Is that the biggest point that we're talking about here? Certainly there are those, and we've got a lot of them who watch this show. I say something negative or I ask a negative question about Ted Cruz. I get slammed on social media right away when even I'm just asking about it. But the fact that the people want him, still, you've got to have the money behind him. And if you don't have that big money, the people can scream all they want, but that money is going to tell the tale.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is going to be a much more expensive presidential campaign than we've ever seen before. There are rumors out there that Jeb Bush wants to raise $100 million in the first quarter of 2015. That far and away eclipses anything we've ever seen in a presidential race. I mean, his brother raised, what, $36 million before the primaries, and now we're talking $100 million in the first quarter of 2016, 2015. This is going to be a very drastic, different beast from what we've seen before.
I've got about 40 seconds left here. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is coming to address Congress. Democrats are bailing on this one. Nancy Pelosi even said today, oh, we're too busy. We've got other things to do. Was this a miscalculation by the Prime Minister and John Boehner?
Well, I don't see it's not a miscalculation. Look, Netanyahu is up for re-election on March 17th, 2 weeks right after his speech in Washington. It is a campaign prop, and a lot of Democrats are reacting to it, basically saying, well, we're not going to try to help Netanyahu win another term in Israel. real. I don't know if it's a miscalculation. I think when eventually Joe Biden, for example, who's kind of on the fence now, he will be there when all's said and done. But it hasn't really gone the way they thought it would.
You think Bibi might find a convenient excuse not to show up?
You never know. I think he'll be there, though. I think he'll be there.
I think he will, too. Always a pleasure,
Always
my
a pleasure.
friend. Thanks so much for coming in and talking to us. All right. That always discussable national unemployment rate, where lawyers and people are told, well, wait a minute, this is a good indicator of where America stands. Well, someone's not been dishing the truth. Hey, what a shock. Bulls, Bears, and Bucks, and we come back. It's time to check out not from what's on Wall Street, but what they're talking about off the street. It's coming up right here on MidPoint.